Welcome to Bonn Park. I'm Sara Geidlinger.
And I'm Marshall Ward.
And today we have a special crossover episode with Mifrah Abid of Across Her Table podcast.
Mifrah's podcast is about in-depth conversations with remarkable Canadian women with immigrant roots and how they are shaping the social narrative in this country.
Check out Mifrah's Across Her Table crossover episode with ours, which will be released on October 2nd. It's actually kicking off her season 3.
Welcome to Bonn Park and Across Her Table.
Welcome to Bonn Park.
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 Do you enjoy Bonn Park podcast?
If so, we would really appreciate it if you
Leave a review.
like, rate, subscribe, but most importantly,
Share directly from the platforms.
with your family and friends. That's the best way to get the word out to everybody, and more people will get to see our show that way. So click those like buttons and share our show. Thank you.
Thanks.
On with the show. This is it.
Why don't we just tackle it the way we would do it then?
Let's tackle it the way we would do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so here we go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Mifrah Abid, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for coming on my podcast too.
I know. I'm so excited about this crossover idea. This was totally your idea. We had a call months ago. I think it might have even been winter where we talked about this. And then with scheduling, we tried to meet up. And then, so heartbreakingly, we actually had a time set up, which was the night of the memorial for the family that was killed in London.
Yeah.
And you said, do you guys mind if we reschedule? And I said, of course, I don't mind. I mean, this is your community and this is who you need to support right now. But after all of that, not to diminish that, but after all of that, we're very glad to have you on our show as well.
Yeah, I am too.
On a bright Sunday morning.
Yeah. I've been actually looking forward to doing this for such a long time myself because, as I said, I'm new to the Waterloo region. I'm relatively new compared to veterans like Sara and Marshall. So you guys know this region in and out, and I'm only just beginning to know it. And that ever since I've come, we've been more or less in a lockdown. So it's only now the past few weeks I'm actually exploring places. And it's a great, your podcast is a great place to start, in knowing like what's happening in the community, who are the folks here, giving me some context, because I always think of myself very ahistorical, being a new immigrant and being new to the region. And I'm always seeking for looking for that context. What's happening here? In what point in time have I arrived in this region? In that sort of thing. So yeah, so that your podcast really is helpful that way,
Well, thanks for saying that. We've been enjoying your podcast as well. Let's douse each other with beautiful compliments. Let's shower each other with beautiful compliments in a moment. For any of our listeners who aren't familiar with Mifrah's podcast, it's called Across Her Table. It's about amazing Canadian women telling their stories, talking about immigrant roots and how those women are shaping the social narrative of their country.
Yeah,
and now kind of. Specifically in our area. So you've had some amazing guests on. You've had Gisela Massa.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And also, Uzma Jalala, right? Am I saying that?
Jalaluddin, right? Uzma Jalaluddin.
Jalaluddin, right. I'm so obsessed with how she's writing these novels, right? When you're talking about the influences and the parallels that we have to some of our classic movies and novels. Amazing guests. So we've really been enjoying it. I know Marshall has a favorite episode of yours.
Yeah. So one where you visit the libraries.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
And I just thought that was brilliant. I guess you start out in Milton, and then you move to here into town. And I think you got like a few of them, like very, very different libraries too, but they all had something really interesting and unique to contribute. And it's it's had me thinking very differently about libraries ever since.
It's I saw it from the immigrant's perspective, because where I come from, they don't have the idea of public libraries. So when I came to Canada, I was obsessed with libraries. Like the kind of services they offer. Like when I talk to people, it's just not books; it's so much more. And I realized I see so much change, like a paradigm shift before my eyes. Like I don't have a lot of context, as I said, but I see things changing and people trying so hard to be welcoming and inclusive. And I think that's such a great trend, and it needed to be be out there and documented, sort of. I love libraries.
Mifra, when you start with Milton, what's interesting for me is I've never spent a minute in Milton. I don't know anything about Milton other than I know it's had incredible growth over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say going 30 years back, I really only knew that there was a Maplehurst prison there. And when I did talk to people about living in Milton, they didn't share a lot about the culture. Or I remember when I asked, what's downtown Milton look like? And they'd say, well, it doesn't really have a downtown kind of thing. So I imagine Milton is looking very, very different these days. Can you tell us a bit about Milton and maybe what your first impression of it was when you moved there?
So I came in November 2017, and I landed directly into Milton because our family, the only immediate family we have in Canada, was there. And in the 3.5 years or 3 years that I was in Milton, I saw so much change myself, like so much new construction and so many new plazas coming up, so many new schools coming up. And one thing I noticed was I saw so many people who look like me. And I generally thought a Western suburb will be it'll not have so much diversity. And so I really felt at home immediately. In the sense that I didn't feel like I was sticking out because of my hijab, or, I was really worried about those things before I came to Canada. But then I was like, okay, there are a lot of other people like me. And it's just they're living the normal life and they're just being Canadian as anybody else is. So that was a very normalizing experience. I didn't have a culture shock. I'm an outsider, I look different and I speak different, that sort of thing. So I found Milton very inviting. But then I moved to Kitchener, and I find the Waterloo region also pretty inviting in the sense. So first I thought it was just a Milton thing, but I think it might be a Canadian thing. I'm not sure yet. So overall, it's very diverse. It's very inviting. It's the part of the GTA, but it still has small town feel about it. Those farms, and that's a big part of, I think, Milton culture, strawberry picking and farms, and everyone seems to know each other. The counselors are all over the place. You just bump into them in the supermarket, that sort of stuff. So a very small, close-knit community kind of vibes it has. So those are my impressions of Milton.
I think you'll find that in KW as well. When you're talking about the library earlier and the programming, that saved me as a new parent.
Mm-hmm.
So it hasn't been very easy lately because all the programming has been online, but now as things open up, fingers crossed they stay that way. I've met some of my best friends that I have now when I was taking my babies to the library to get that social time. You going to these library programs where you're singing Itsy Bitsy Spider and little, nursery rhymes with your kids and reading books together. And we still are great friends with some of those people that we met in those rooms, and going and picking up your books was secondary. It was secondary to that experience. So really the WPL, especially uptown, we didn't have the Harper branch over here at the time, but the WPL uptown, I lived there when the kids were small, and I would just go from Waterloo Park to the library and back. And yeah, it saved me. It really did. That was my social connection with the community, really. Mm-hmm.
So since you've been living in here, had we not had a pandemic, where had you imagined exploring as far as, I'm trying to imagine, arriving in Milton, Ontario, and, next first stops would probably be Niagara Falls and Toronto and all sorts of those areas. And then possibly wanting to get across the border and see maybe New York State. What was your hopes?
Actually, when I came to Milton, it was so cold for us in November, coming from India. So we didn't explore much immediately. Plus, we didn't have a car. My brother-in-law used to drive us a lot, but then, we went mostly to get our PR cards, to get our health cards, or sort of, essential trips. But we did go to Niagara Falls and Ripley's and CN Tower. Those are all on my list. And the whole idea, I want to be in the city. I don't want to be in the town, that sort of thing. But when I went to Toronto, I was like, oh no, I think I'm more of a suburban person. I don't like the traffic. I don't like
very busy.
Yeah, I don't like that. so I should go a lot to Mississauga and explore. And most of the explorations we did was all over the place. I went to Vancouver, I went to Ottawa, I went to Montreal. I just wanted to explore everything. My husband and I love to travel. And had it not been for the pandemic, I think I would be in Nova Scotia or something this year. But
wow, you packed a lot in.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
First couple years. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I really like to, as I told Sara before, I like to live like a local. I don't like to just do the touristy things, but just, get into the skin of the community and see how the community live here on, not from the outsider's perspective, from the insider's perspective. So as I said, the first things I did was like, get my library card and then, go to the sports center, enroll my kids in all sorts of activities. Swimming, something which I don't know how to do, like swimming and ice skating, which I never did. I never had ice skates in my life, but I want my kids to do all of that. So, just live as a local here.
And that's good for the kids too, right? If they're that's how they're going to find their social connection, especially with this year of online learning.
Yes.
Trying to find buddies, and I know a lot of programs have been closed. My kids haven't. My kids are big volleyball players, and they haven't done any of that through this whole time. And I'm always saying, you guys should take the ball out, and there's YouTube to watch. So it's pretty tricky for them to do that. But no, I think that's wonderful to get in there and start living like a local. I mean, we take that for granted, definitely, because this is our space. But what's been your favorite find so far?
It's very hard to say, but I think all the local stuff, libraries and the local bakeries and the local sports centers, the local ice rinks. Those are things that we keep going back to. Like, I've traveled in Canada a little bit, but those are like once in a year for 4 or 5 days, and that's it. I like to keep that experience, which is ongoing and, continuous, and make those connections nonstop. So those connections also mean a lot to me. It's not like just go for a vacation and come back. That's one thing, but other things as well. So this whole idea of living like a local and exploring local gems is something which I really cherish. So I'm like, now that things are opening up, I'm looking up all these directories, what are the best apple picking farms in KW region? What are the strawberry picking farms? Because I know a lot of the GTA, but now it's my turn to learn something about the local scene here.
That's wonderful. One of the ways that I've learned a lot about our community is reading Marshall's column. Marshall's been a writer in the Waterloo Chronicle for 15 years, and he writes about our locals, some other things too, but a lot about finding that human connection in people that you just bump into in the street and learning about them and sharing that with the rest of the community. But Mifra, you've been writing for the Chronicle also.
On and off.
I think that's a on and off. I think that's a good connection that you and Marshall have.
Yeah. It's nice to know your community and what they're thinking, what their ideas are. So one of the things I did was take the physical subscription of the Record for the weekends, because I want my kids to start reading the newspaper as well. And then they come up to me with, oh, this is new restaurant that's open here, like, the weekend edition. And they're reading local news and also some international and national news. And I want to develop that kind of outlook in them. So it seems very anachronistic to have like an actual paper coming to your door in this day and age. But they've had so much screen time. I want them to sit down and read newspapers sometimes.
I think that's important too.
Yeah. And I had a question for you guys, like, why Bonn Park? Why that name?
Do you want to take it this time?
Yeah.
I always take it and run really far.
So when Sara and I were both stay-at-home parents, each with 2 girls, back like 15 years ago, and
we're old.
12 years ago and 10 years. We met in our neighborhood at a park called Bonn Park, and by park I mean just a really small little spot in the suburb with one playground structure and 2 swings. And when I became a full-time stay-at-home parent, I had this idea that I'd go to parks and there'd be all sorts of other stay-at-home parents, and we would all talk and chat. But that didn't quite play out the way I imagined. Oftentimes there were maybe grandparents there, or some of the groups of the moms kind of, stuck to themselves. And I felt like a bit of an outsider, and I understand that, and that's okay. And it didn't quite click. But when I met Sara, we both had a love and appreciation for arts and culture. And Sara wanted to talk about things beyond, potty training and and those kind of things. And I found those kind of conversations gave me a lot of really good energy, to the point where if I saw her, she was there with her girls, it'd be like, oh, thank goodness, I'm an adult to talk to have an adult conversation. Because I remember feeling starved for it,
Thanks for considering me an adult. I appreciate it.
No, I remember I felt so starved for adult conversations sometimes that when you went through the checkout at the grocery store, I'd just be yakking away like super fast, just sucking up that moment with the front end clerk, or I'd get on the saddest days in the winter, I'd get a telemarketer on the phone and try to strike up a conversation. Right. And it's like, it could feel so isolating. And so anyways, I always really valued that. And then, like so many ways relationships go, the years march on and your kids grow up, and but we still, in a sense, live these parallel lives, in the same neighborhood. And then when we reconnected 2 years ago, we just kind of picked up where we left off. And had a lot to talk about. Our kids were all teenagers now, or Summer was almost a teenager. And but we never lost that connection we had, and that love for our community, and talking about just its incredible vibrancy. There's no question that Waterloo was given the title the creative capital of Canada. I'm in awe of Waterloo region every day.
I can't believe how many wonderful people that we've had on this show who are willing to come and talk on Bonn Park, talk to us about what they do, how they do it, if they've had a career change. I mean, we've talked to a mom who had a baby during COVID, but then we've talked to a musician who switched careers and now works for the city, and we've talked to a geologist and a naturopath, and there's all these different life paths. It's been incredibly inspiring and has really carried us through the pandemic.
Yeah.
Add to that the work that's been done at places like the Institute for Quantum Computing and the Perimeter Institute.
That's amazing. The range of guests you guys have had is just mind-boggling. Like, how do you make this connection? In fact, one of the next questions was like, how do you reach out? How do you make these connections with these people?
That's a really good question. So we have one rule: they have to be local. They have to be from the region. And we broke it once because we found a man named Bonn Park, and we were like, he has to come on our show. He's a Korean German playwright, and he's an incredibly interesting soul. So we had to break the rule for that. I mean, that's just way too fun. But a lot of it was we were minding our own community.
Yeah.
And you can see that in our grid of guests. You can see that a lot of people from our own community. And then we just started reaching out. Marshall would ask people that he met through writing or through exploring the city.
Yeah.
Friends of friends. And I do a lot of cold DMing, just asking people like, would you like to come on our show and talk to us? And it's usually an enthusiastic yes, or you want to talk to me. Our most popular episode ever was a retired teacher who is you always help me with this.
He's a power lifter.
I always say heavyweight champion, and that's not what that is. That's a wrestling term. And he said, why do you want to talk to me? I don't have anything to say. That's been our most popular episode to date.
Oh,
wow. So it's just like that connection with the community. We know most of our listeners are going to be in KW, and then of course, like when we get those listens from around the world, that's definitely their extended community that they're bringing to our podcast. But that's how we do it.
And I would add to it that, and these are not the same names you hear over and over again who get lots of media attention. These are people who don't always, sometimes it's their first interview ever, but they've been doing incredible work in the community for years, and sometimes I've known these people for decades. And it isn't until we had them on the podcast do I even understand their story and how they started their business. And I find a common theme, Sara and Mifra, is there's a lot of people who took a huge chance at some point in their life and rolled the dice and left a career, or just dived right in and somehow
made it happen,
made a huge change for themselves, which I find one of the scariest things of all is those kind of changes. So
you always say that opening a restaurant is like your biggest fear.
Yeah. I don't know how people open restaurants. It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Is this going to work?
Yeah, that's a leap for sure.
Yeah. And I really appreciate that. And I'm beginning to appreciate even more now, because the place that I work for has been doing great work, but they have always kept their focus local. And my executive director, Fawzia Mazhar, is always like, even if somebody wants to replicate our work elsewhere, we would like the locals to take the charge, because so much is underestimated when it comes to grassroots level work, because nobody knows the community better than the locals. And the trust that is built there, the community, the sense of community, the sense of connection. You just can't have an outsider or a national level figure make that kind of one-on-one connection as someone, you pass by in the park or something, that bump into the library. Those connections are invaluable and often underestimated in my opinion. So I think this great job that you guys are doing, like, just highlighting these everyday heroes. That needs to
Thanks for saying that. I feel like you're touching on, you're reminding me of the show, The Simpsons. I know that you're consuming a lot of Canadian culture lately. I see it on your Twitter feed, which I'm really enjoying your Twitter feed, by the way. I think that's where we first connected. You reached out to me on Twitter.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. Well, if you've ever seen this episode of The Simpsons called Monorail, this company comes flying into Springfield of unknown origin. We never know where Springfield is, and tries to sell them this big transit system, and it just ruins the town. An outsider comes in and ends up, everyone buys into it, and it ruins the town, right? And so what you're saying about grassroots and locals, I mean, there's really no other way to affect change than to talk to your neighbors and try and get that support or try and spread your message. Right. And are we talking about your position at the Coalition of Muslim Women, KW?
Yeah.
And why don't you tell us about that work?
So it is something which is very unexpected because I was a lecturer of English in India. And when I came to Canada, I spent 1.5 years doing my diploma in ESL. First my TESOL Canada, then my TESOL Ontario. And I was just ready to, join the workforce when the pandemic hit. And that's when basically the podcast began. And then that's how I connected with the Coalition of Muslim Women when I came here. I started as a volunteer, and then now I am the coordinator of their Together Against Islamophobia program. And it's interesting. People think I deal only with Islamophobia, but basically we have a hate reporting tool where anyone who has experienced racism or xenophobia or Islamophobia can contact us, report the incident, and seek one-on-one supports. Because, a lot of times some incident doesn't reach the threshold of a crime. So the police can get involved, or if they want to, the people don't want the police to be involved for whatever reason. And so that is my job primarily, but also outreach and awareness and that sort of stuff. So it's something which I've never done before, but it's humbling because sometimes it gets really hard listening to all those stories. But at the same time, it just is, it's a good feeling to know that, in whatever little capacity you can make some change. Not a lot of change, but whatever you can do. And it's really heartening to know that you can be part of that solution in whatever way that solution looks like. So as I said, it's not just for Islamophobia. We have had people from the Black community, from the Asian community who've been facing a lot of hate these days, especially in COVID, who've come to us and asked for supports. And, we've tried to be there for anybody who needs it. So it only shows that there's a lot of work to be done, but it's not impossible. And that's really the most, that's what, gets me going every day. Like, okay, we can do something, we can change something, we can help somebody. It may not look like a lot, like we're not like national level or provincial level organization. We're a very, very, very grassroots level organization. So that is my role there, actually.
But you are a government funded registered charity,
yes,
right? I think that's important for people to know as well. And it's incredibly important for people to know how effective it is when things are reported, when incidents are reported. If we just, of any kind, really, if we just keep it to ourselves and we don't share that information, people don't think it's a problem. So that reporting tool is, I think, monumental in the process.
Yes. And most hate crime and hate incidents go unreported. Most people just don't document it and
just sort of take it and move forward. And
they don't know what resources are available, or they're too traumatized to go to the police, for example, or they have some sort of fear of, what the process entails. So we're trying to create the safe space, and we can say, what, we'll only keep that information to ourselves, we not share with anybody, but whatever we can do to help you. And the whole range of help differs from case to case. It could be counseling support, like someone who's undergone trauma. It could be actually taking the case to the police if there is a physical real harm that's happened, and this has to be reported. It also can look at the new program that we have started called SULA with Community Justice Initiatives, also another Waterloo Region organization, and they provide restorative justice, basically mediation for conflicts. And SULA is a partnership between the Coalition of Muslim Women and Community Justice Initiatives. And what we do is we provide mediation in conflicts where there's race-based conflict. It could be two neighbors, it could be employer and employee, it could be landlord and tenant. And we believe that just throwing somebody in jail or prosecuting somebody is not the answer. You have to understand what's happening here, understand the impacts if there's a race or hate-based incident that's happened. So, there are a lot of supports that are available, and I would really like the community to know that, just reach out. You'll be surprised sometimes at what is available and what you can access. And of course, we don't charge for anything.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to hate crimes, Premier Doug Ford was on the news the other day, and it was a live segment, and somebody put the microphone on his face and said, they're talking about a recent vandalism hate crime. And they said, what's the province going to do about it? And he was quick to say, well, there's two steps. He said, one is it starts with education. He said, quite young in the schools. We need more education. He said, secondly, he said, the next part is up to the justice of the peace out there, and no more slaps on the wrist. Like, let's really hand out some serious, sentences. Do you find that kind of simplistic, or does that make sense that that's a starting point?
Sounds contradictory to me.
Well, I think politicians have to say the right quote unquote things in a sense that they don't want to get any trouble. They don't want to get into specifics. But as I said, combating hate is a multi-pronged approach. Awareness and education is one as a preventative thing. Some things require, as I say, mediation and just have the harm doer understand the impact that they're created. A lot of people say, oh, but I didn't intend to do harm, but you've created an impact. So in that case, maybe restorative justice or just, some sort of counseling and discussions, like trained discussions are important. But when there's an act of violence, then yes, in that case, there should be like a strong message going, this is not okay in our communities. So as I said, it all depends from case to case. And you can't have like one size fits all, like everybody should be prosecuted, everybody should go to jail, everybody should, get like a sentence. It doesn't work that way. In fact, I think it'll just breed more hate. Like, oh, I'm in trouble because of this community, so I'm going to hate them even more. I've seen that happen. So sometimes you just need that outreach. Like, you know what, this is what you've done. This is the impact you've created. Do you want to talk about it? So that's where something like the SULA program comes. So as I said, there's a range of approaches, but definitely there should be more accountability. I'm not sure about if prosecution and, that sort of thing is the answer, but definitely more accountability. And accountability can take a lot of forms. It doesn't mean that you go to jail and you're being held accountable. That's not really the solution always. So there should be more funding to explore these options and how to create accountability. Unfortunately, most of the funding just goes to the police, and then that's that. Organizations, grassroots level organizations need that kind of funding to, explore other options as well. So yeah, I think yes and no. I don't agree with the premier in all things, but it's a vague answer. And that's why yes and no, because it doesn't go into specifics. A lot of rhetoric.
We're going to take a moment to hear from this episode's sponsor. Bonn Park is supported by Crania Schools. Stephen Hawking, the famous late physicist, once said computer programming is an essential skill to learn, whether you want to uncover the secrets of the universe or you want to pursue a career in the 21st century. Hawking would likely have approved of Crania Schools, where young people learn exceptional mathematics and cutting-edge computer programming, along with other courses that build both technical skills and critical thinking. For kids already studying math in school, Crania offers enrichment courses and encourages participation in competitions like the world-renowned University of Waterloo Math Contest, the Caribou Math Contest, and the American Mathematics Competition. And how cool is this? Crania students also learn to write code in the world's most popular programming languages, including Python and JavaScript. There are coding classes for junior, intermediate, and senior levels. A must for any student wishing to explore careers in science, technology, arts, engineering, and math. Crania uses an evidence-based curriculum that builds upon both a decade of research in global math programs and incorporates practical teaching experience. Crania is rooted in a family tradition of teaching and is committed to helping each learner reach their full potential. During the time he spent at Waterloo's Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics, Stephen Hawking was impressed by the scientific curiosity and smarts among many young people in our region. Crania aims to keep that legacy alive. Check out Crania for yourself at the Boardwalk in Waterloo. Want to know more? Call 519-781-8810 or visit crania-schools.com. And now back to the show.
This ties back to what we were talking about earlier, but I was just so impressed with the work that had already been done in those libraries that you covered. Mm-hmm. When you went into that episode, you thought, well, I'm going to get a few different voices here, mm-hmm. And a few different perspectives. Did you have an idea of how cohesive that's a beautiful episode? It flows so nicely from one interview to the next. And sometimes they echo each other and sometimes there's a new idea presented. And we're talking about sizes of different sizes and how long they've been around and the cities that surround them. And, did you have any idea going into that episode that you'd have this amazing, cohesive little piece you can put together?
That was the idea. I'm glad it translated well. That is what I wanted to do. Bring all the, all the ideas together. And that came in a new series called Brewing Ideas. It's slightly different from the regular episodes that I do. I'm glad you liked it because it took a lot of time to take off in terms of people listening, because there were no celebrities or like known figures in that episode. But yeah, I had so many ideas. I've talked to Sara about some other ideas about brewing ideas we had, but I've never had the time to sit down and get on with it. It's taken almost 6 months to get to this point of having this episode with you guys.
Yeah,
Well, I wanted to say, Sarah, like I want to make an episode like that.
Oh, that'd be
like,
fun.
Just 3 kind of different people, and just a story that, one interview flows into the next, right?
Well, we've branched out a little bit. We've got this 3-part series going for the St. Jacobs Farmers Market, and talking to a lot of vendors and farmers, and talking to people about the history and covering the fire and all those types of things. So we've sort of really broken out of our shell to get there.
Yeah.
But Marshall and I have promised ourselves for the rest of the year, we are or moving into next year, we're mostly booked for this year, that we're going to schedule fun. We have to schedule more fun in our podcast and things that that might take us out of our comfort zone a little bit, which is where the fun happens.
Yeah, for sure.
Think. Yeah.
Speaking of fun, I imagine this, Sarah will agree with this, that when you've grown up here, like for example, the CN Tower was built in 1980. So I would have been a kid when I first saw it. And I was probably really little when I first saw Niagara Falls. Mm-hmm. Or the St. Jacobs Farmers Market, for example. We were just talking about how, man, wouldn't that be amazing to see that for the first time through new eyes? But it's always been here for us. And or in the case of Niagara Falls, I guess in some cases you hear it before you even see it. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a bit about those experiences of the CN Tower, Niagara Falls, and also the St. Jacobs Farmers Market, and what impression those made on you the first time you saw them?
Or have you been to the market?
I have.
Yeah.
I have. It's a beautiful market.
And if you went in the winter, that's very different than the summer.
I went in fall, but I remember being so amazed with the whole atmosphere. And I remember putting it up on my Instagram, and somebody from India is like, "Oh, you were excited about a veggie market because what is it?" And I was like, it's so much more, because I could see the locals coming out there. I could see so many unique things being up for sale, and the fresh produce. And a lot of things were closed because of COVID back then, but it still made an impression on me. And I keep telling my husband, "Oh, we need to go back again." And but generally our weekends are like so booked with other things. But we have so many things on our list. Like we want to cram up everything in summer. About Niagara Falls, I'd heard so much about it. And I think I enjoyed it more in the second and third visit, because the first visit, you're always comparing your impressions before seeing it and after seeing it, and things like, "Oh, I thought it was bigger, and I thought it'll be less crowded, and look, this, I thought." So you're just trying to compare notes, and you're not really enjoying it so much. But the second time around, when you just stand there and you see the drop, and you feel the awe. And I was there 2 weeks ago, and whenever I stand there, there's only one word that comes out of my mouth, which is it's an Arabic word, which is Subhanallah. It's glory be to God, because it is so awe-inspiring. All that tons and tons of water just cascading down. I think it's very mesmerizing. So I think I truly enjoyed Niagara Falls after my second visit. The first visit was like a blur of trying to cover everything, that fun street, the Hershey store, and this and that. Like you're trying to catch so many images at one go in like one day. It can get overwhelming. About the CN Tower, I didn't enjoy it so much. Niagara Falls was something that really stays with you, but CN Tower was, like I've been to Malaysia, I've been to Dubai, and you've seen the Petronas, you've seen the Burj Khalifa. So it doesn't create that much of an impact. But then the view of the skyline from Toronto Islands, that was something that really, impressed me. We
were just talking to Mike Farrell about that he just saw it for the first time and he was in awe over it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I think my favorite place so far has been Lake Ontario. I did not want to leave the GTA just for Lake Ontario. I can just sit there for hours, do nothing, and just be inspired. Like it's so beautiful, it's so magnificent. So I was like crying, I don't want to leave the lake. And then we bought a house very close to the Grand River. So I think God compensated me, because I love water bodies. I can't swim, but I love water bodies. So the river is beautiful. And
it is.
You'll always see me just standing there, just looking at the water. And it's really humbling. And I really mean it. It's humbling because I don't know how to explain this. You see the water cascading down and you just say, "Oh, whoever created this knew what they were doing." I think what I really liked was some things in Canada was Whistler in Vancouver. I think I was in awe of Stanley Park. I was there for 5 days, and I think I covered everything that a tourist should do in those 5 days. um, Overall, I think Canada is a magnificently beautiful country. It's just magnificent, and you could just stop at one, like Montreal, for example, in Montreal, and just overlook everything and say, how beautiful is this? And I don't take it for granted. Like everything, even after almost 4 years, I'm just awed. Like every fall, my eyes just pop and say, how do these colors happen?
And it's magic.
Yeah, it is magic. And I don't know, maybe some people don't see it that way, but when I first saw it, I was like, I don't want to ever get used to this. I don't want to ever spend another fall and say, oh, this happens every year, but it's a big deal. I never want to have that complacency set in. I want to always be awed. I want to always be, surprised and, just be, inspired each time. And I love, the cycles of Canada, like in the seasons, the different seasons in India. And I'm sure if you went there, you'd probably be impressed by the monsoons and, something different. I grew up with that. So I kind of, it doesn't inspire me as like, in a sense, like it doesn't take me out of my comfort zone anymore, that sort of thing.
The city you grew up in, is it pronounced Pune?
Pune. Pune was old
Pune?
name, but now it's called Pune. I was born in Mumbai, which is Bombay back then.
Yeah. Is there anything cuisine-wise that you just can't seem to seek out and find here that you? I know sometimes
you love this question.
Yeah, well, I have neighbors that who came from France, and they're like,
it's true. You can't get a good bread.
Can't find bread that I want. And is there anything you just haven't seen or you're looking for that just doesn't seem to be here?
Oh, well, there's a very vibrant Indian food scene here. So most of the things we do get, but I miss the special flavors. Like there's a street food in the city of Pune called vada pav, which is like a Indian burger, veggie burger. And I don't think I've seen that anytime here, or at least it's not been done the way it's done back home. And that's very specific to my city. So even North Indians wouldn't know about that. And North Indian cuisine is the more popular cuisine here. But otherwise, I'm very fond of South Indian cuisine, which is like totally different from North, like completely. And it's called Udupi. And I've seen quite a few Udupi restaurants. I've not tried any in the KW region. I'm just dying to do that now. So overall, I think the food scene is pretty good, but no vada pavs.
I highly recommend classic Indian.
Oh yeah, that's good stuff.
That's Southern Indian food. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to backtrack for a second and talk to you about something podcasty geeky. So you might not be the right part of this pair to discuss this, but what I really found sort of heartwarming and reassuring is that you're like, we can see when I go back to the first episode of your podcast and listen to it to now, and you're embarking on season 3 this summer,
yes.
This year still, is I can see the growth. Mm-hmm. I could see the sound quality changing. I can see the editing and the flow and everything coming together. And we had that same kind of journey. We didn't really know what we were doing. And you guys, although your husband is the techie side of your podcast, it's Javid.
Javid, yeah.
Javid is the techie part of your podcast. You must know some of that journey. Did you guys dove in, maybe not knowing what you're getting into?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I am the most tech challenged person you'll ever meet in your life. So
I don't know. I think Marshall can give you a run for your money.
Yeah.
Marshall doesn't even have a cell phone.
Oh, okay. I'm better then.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm going to make t-shirts that say that because I say it to anyone who will listen. But
my wife yesterday, Mifra, said, I think it's time that you get a cell phone. That was the first time she's
Did you storm out of the house?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
No, she backed it up with several reasons.
Yep.
As our girls are getting older, and she said, I think you would benefit greatly if you had one for this and this reason.
Wow.
And the other day I realized I was somewhere and I thought, oh, I could totally use a cell phone right now,
I wish you had one.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Like, I don't think I've ever met anybody. I don't know anybody who doesn't own a cell phone anymore. Like, you're the first person I know.
I know what it is. It's like, this is what it was. We go to the farmer's market and we can't really split up. Well, we can and meet at a certain place. But I mean, the cell phone just makes it so easy. Just, I'm at the white market tent.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It does make it easy for that. Although, was it your maybe Twitter or Facebook where I saw you posting a meme that was like, can we all take a second to appreciate my mom using a Kindle as a bookmark? That would be Marshall, I think. They're using the Kindle machine as the bookmark in their novel.
Sorry. I just remember what it is.
What is it?
I was on the hunt yesterday for all sorts of stuff that has to do with Legend of Zelda, Nintendo stuff that was coming out yesterday.
The family of gamers.
I was running around from store to store, and it would have been so handy for me to call home and say, okay, I found this. Do you need that? Right.
I couldn't even tell you where a payphone is right now.
No. Right. And I was just thinking, that would make it so much easier. And I found myself driving home and
then asking.
Yeah.
It might be time, Marshall.
Yeah.
It might be time.
Yeah. So it's amazing because my husband goes to the grocery store, especially the ethnic ones, and he'll call me a minimum of 2 times. Do you want this brand or do you want that brand? I'm like, you in the grocery store, take a decision. Don't take the plunge.
I'll trust you.
Yeah.
Go for it. But yeah, I mean, you guys jumped into it the same way that we did. We wanted to do this project. We were excited to do this project. We started in July 2019, but we really didn't know what we were doing. We had to do a lot of research. We had to figure some things out and just dive in and go for it. And you guys had that same journey, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I left all that figuring out part to Javed. Because I do all the hard work with the editing and, the content and also, so you do some work. What is your contribution? So, so setting up the website and that's the kind of stuff. And, so I always have him standby when I'm recording something because I know something will go wrong. And I'm like, I muted myself. I was like, Javed, where are you? Nothing's working. And he'll come running.
Well, just like today, we had an interesting start today. Like I said, things will run smoothly for like 6 weeks in a row. And then all of a sudden we can't hear anyone, we can't see anyone, and we don't know what happened. So.
Yeah.
And what about how you decided to present your artwork? Did you, what were you thinking about when you decided, I like my artwork to look like this for the podcast, which is also similar to the way your headshot works in the Chronicle. It's a straight on, headshot and then stark white background. It's stunning. I like the way the white actually blends into the white of the Chronicle website. Like, did you think to yourself, this is how I want to present myself in this very clean, kind of simple way? Yeah.
Like, although that photograph is quite old now, I don't look like that anymore, but then I don't have any clean shots like that anymore. So I like to keep it simple, not too cluttered with anything and just focus on one thing. Like you see a lot of things that I repeat throughout my podcast, like the music and all, I like to keep everything consistent. So there's nothing jarring, so that new ideas are appreciated. It's not like overwhelming information for the listeners, one thing at a time. So I was really nervous, like, for example, the Brewing Ideas episode, because it's not something that we had done before. And we don't have the technical know-how to do that. So we're really worried about how it's going to be, received. But so the key thing was just to keep it as simple as possible, as non-complicated as possible. So just clean lines, clean narrative, like not too much going on. So I think that's kind of helped because we're newbies and we can't be too, what do you call it? We can't all have the bells and whistles at this point. So when you don't have that, just keep it clean and easy and old school. I think that's what we're going for.
I read an article a little while back about you, and it talked a bit about how, I think in the interview you said that coming to Canada, some of your skill sets are not always that well transferable. What would some of those be, and why would that be?
For example, I was an English teacher, and I taught phonology. I taught graduate level students. I taught literary theory. I taught a lot of things, like structuralism, post-structuralism, colonialism, in literature. And suddenly I come here and no college will touch me. And I try to volunteer in a lot of places, like, the local colleges, and they don't see a need for a person who's come from abroad, who's an immigrant. Like, why would someone want to learn English from a person for whom English is not the first language? You will not believe that when I went for the ESL, I said, okay, ESL is the easier option. Like, there are a lot of ESL schools in every neighborhood. So when I was going through my training, one of the students who was also an immigrant said, do you know that we'd rather learn it from a white person whose first language is English and who has an accent and who doesn't have, the Indian accent in their voice. And she said, piece of advice, just try to get the Canadian accent as fast as possible. That is what one of the students said. She was, I know she meant well because she saw me as a student, coming there as a student teacher, but I never really broke through in that field. Despite having the qualifications, despite having so many years of experience, I just didn't. I don't know. So it was hard. And I see this happen to a lot of people who are dentists and doctors, and their qualifications are not sufficient here. They have to do so many years more, study for so many years more, and it burns them out because they've already done like 5 or 7 years at back home in India, and then another 3 or 4 years here, and the best years of your life are gone. So that's been a common experience with a lot of people. And you see a lot of immigrants switch careers like I have, because, I was like, what's the next best option? How can I use my skills in some other field? So I always tried, my resume was always tailored to transferable skills. That's what I was told. Focus on transferable skills. Don't stick on to the skills you've developed the past 10 years. Just say, okay, I can do this as well. And that's what I did actually, eventually, to get a job. So as I said, I'd never imagined I'd be in like social justice, but here I am.
And those skills did transfer.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah.
I was thinking of something when we were chatting there, and now I've lost it because I was thinking about my own resume. I was actually thinking about my own resume when you said transferable skills. I floated there.
It's hard for me to not to think about the skills we're learning doing this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like it's like we're doing a master's degree on our community.
Yeah, no, we are.
In a sense. And what we take away from these the knowledge I'm talking about from these, whether it's a groundwater specialist or someone who's the director of communications at Perimeter Institute, or someone who's who's moved around actually, like from career to career. I find those really inspiring too, right? It's we're taking a lot from these guests that we have the privilege of interviewing, eh?
It's deliciously selfish.
Yeah.
No, for sure. The connections I made in the past year through a podcast, eventually, I think it worked very well in my resume because, people saw me as entrenched in the Canadian way of life. I don't know if that was really the case, but then, I was making connections all across Canada, like somebody from Alberta, for example, most people from GTA, but that really opened doors for me in that it got me the step in the door to meet new people, to make new connections. It was basically a LinkedIn profile, but live. But for sure, the kind of things that you learn from our guests are invaluable, the kind of connections that you make. And it was even more important for me because I said I came here so contextless. No friends, just a few, one family member who was immediate and a few family members otherwise. But other than that, we didn't know anybody. We didn't know anybody when we came to the KW region except my husband's boss. Nobody, like we just took the plunge. So the podcast has really, really helped me make connections. Like I'm here on the virtual table with you guys. I don't think I would have ever met you guys if it wasn't for the podcast. So I think that's a real win.
I find one of the most powerful things is when the guests validate something for you, us, the hosts, that we're on the right track. Like you can really have these self-doubts and then you talk to somebody. It's almost like it's a proverbial pat on the back. Like, it's okay. You're on the right track. You're doing well. And sometimes we need that, and that's the gift that the guests give me often.
That is true. And when we started the podcast, we always thought about what is not being represented. That is the thing that we asked ourselves, because when we started doing our reading, we said your audience should be very niche. Others, because you have thousands of podcasts, you'll get lost. So we just narrowed down. What experience is not being talked about? Yes, the immigrant experience, the immigrant woman experience, the immigrant woman Muslim experience. All those three. And then suddenly we had this host of women calling us and saying, I identify with that. And this was really inspiring. And I went through something similar. And I didn't even know this person had this story. Like I knew them as a public figure, but I didn't know their backstory. So that was really interesting. And how we connected with a very, very specific but significant population.
And Mifra, have you found that there's women in town here who have some of these immigrant experiences that, oddly, I'll give you the example. My next door neighbor, Aisha, for years, like I saw her grow up from age 6 to age 18. Mm-hmm. I remember when she was in high school, I was asking her about high school and we talked about a whole wide range of things. I remember her saying to me one time, she said, every once in a while, someone will say something really odd. She said, I had a classmate and Aisha wore her hijab to school, would say, why are you trying to be so Canadian? And Aisha would say, well, first of all, I was born in Guelph. What do you mean? I am Canadian. And she's saying, what are you referring to? She goes, well, you're like wearing a hijab and then you're wearing designer jeans. Like that doesn't make any sense, is what this student said to her. And I remember Aisha just feeling so perplexed at this idea of, and we laughed about it because I said, are designer jeans Canadian? And it got me really thinking about what is like, do I dress Canadian? I don't know.
Yeah, what is Canadian?
Yeah. And anyways, sadly, Aisha would have had to navigate her way around things like that. But does that sound like something you've heard time and again?
Most definitely. My daughter just started taking her hijab, and we said, okay, maybe you can wait for a little longer. But she was very insistent. And she's like, no, this is what I want to do. And she went out to play with her friends, and some of the neighbors said, do you shower in that? And she came to me like really upset. And I said, just ignore him. He's just doing it for attention. But her older cousin said, you should just ask him, do you shower in your clothes? Like if you don't like, it's just like piece of clothing, right? Do you shower in any of your clothes? And we just laughed at it. But she's getting confident in her skin and you know, like in who she is. And sometimes when she sees people who are different from herself, she comes and asks me about it. And I said, just our motto is just let people be who they are. You know, everybody's different. Just let them be, because we've been at the receiving end of those really, really awkward questions so many times. So we just want to be mindful, and we ask questions to others as well about, you know, why they do certain things. It's how you frame the question that's really important. A lot of times it's not framed very politely.
And doesn't that come down to education too of our kids? Like, I remember my oldest daughter coming home and saying, she was upset that a boy had said, what's your problem? Are you on your period? And I taught her to say, what's your excuse next time that he says that? What experience in this young boy, and this might've been 6th grade, 5th grade. Yeah. What experience has brought you to the point where you think that's an acceptable thing to say to a young girl on the playground? You know? Yeah. So what education has he had to be sensitive to somebody else's life? And also that's incredibly inappropriate. Just like it's inappropriate to talk about somebody's clothing and ask them if they shower. Welcome
to the 21st century.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know. We need to do better.
Yeah. Education for sure. But also the realization that no matter how much we educate, there'll always be these people who'll be trying to bringing you down. I think it's like human nature sometimes that, you know, if you don't keep it in check, it will go everywhere. Like, you know, it will go out of control. But the idea is that just be prepared and, you know, maintain grace in the face of it all.
I used to talk to when my girls were young teens, I would often hear their school, like their classmates say things like, that's so stupid, right? Everything was so stupid. And I used to always say to my girls, you know, it'd be so much better if they said, I don't understand, right? Just simply say, I don't understand that. But instead they go with, that's so stupid, right? And I think that's a huge part, is like right from the start, just get them really thinking about their choice of words, you know, and how they want to communicate those ideas. Because it's really the same idea they're having. They just don't know how to communicate it respectfully.
And grown-ups, check yourselves when you're speaking.
Yeah. Hey, I thought we could wind down with in your case, Mifra, when I heard about your vision for the podcast and some of the things you wanted to do along the way, I would say like mission accomplished, eh? Like you've done a great job. You must feel incredibly, I guess, both satiated, but also you must have lots of ideas on where you want to take it. Can you talk about that?
I do. I want to do a brewing idea on Indigenous people from the perspective of immigrants, because I feel immigrants have benefited from a colonial system, which has kind of impacted one people. You know, like we are economic immigrants, right? So we're not, but, you know, we have kind of benefited from the system, which has created this express entry system and all that. And as I said, like me, there's so many immigrants who are contextless and they don't know what has happened in the past. And I'm trying to learn every day. Just last week, I had attended lunch and learned with, you know, some Indigenous stories. This is something very, very new for me. And I believe it must be for a lot of immigrants who are struggling to find jobs, to find homes, to find connections. And then top of it, then they have this this context which they're missing out. So I wanted to do an episode in which this information is kind of tailored to the immigrant experience, like targeted at them. Like, do you know this land that you have benefited from has also a problematic history, and how we can be allies? Like, we need allies a lot of times as visibly Muslim people in Canada. So we should be allies to others as well. So, you know, if everybody thinks that way, maybe we can change the narrative. So I wanted to do that 101, but I just want to make sure that it's sensitive enough and it's not, you know, again, self-serving. Because again, it's so easy to make a podcast out of it, and, you know, it benefits me and it doesn't benefit the people that it's supposed to. So I want to really do my reading, take some, you know, insights on people who, you know, like real Indigenous people from their real experiences before I just run with it. That was one. And I've talked to Sara about, the whole idea of food culture appropriation. And I've been sitting on it for so long.
I love this idea too. I mean, they're both beautiful ideas, but I'm familiar with this one. Yeah.
Yeah. So just the idea, like, when does food culture appropriation happen? When is it just appreciation from other cultures' food? Like that fine line, is there a line? I would just want to explore that. Like, I love Chinese food and, Italian food, but and I make sometimes Italian food with Indian herbs. So, which could be very controversial, but I make it whatever is available at home. But what if I try to sell it? That sort of thing. So I want to explore that. What do people think about it? What are people's thoughts? And yeah, there are ideas. I just don't feel I have enough time to, explore them immediately, but hopefully I can in the future.
Hey all, thanks for meeting us in Bonn Park. Please like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on the platform that you're listening to. And follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Bonn Park Podcast. Original music by Alan Lung.